it's really nice to be here and start the spring ahead, all the new stuff, you know. When I was praying backstage with the group, you know, it's interesting because in the springtime, and especially around this time, there is so much happening under the earth in regards to the seeds. Like they're working overtime, frustrating themselves out of their little shells and moving into, growing into, you know, leaves and trees and fruits and plants. And I remember when I first moved here and I had my first winter after not having a winter for 20 years, and I talked to Will and I was like, everything's dead, it's never coming back. Like I was like, it's dead, everything. He's like, no, it's gonna come back. I'm like, no, it's dead. And I shared this thought with a friend of mine. She's like, but you didn't really think that, did you? I was like, no, I really thought that. I'm not very complicated up here, you know what I mean? So, but it came back. And for me, there's just like a miracle. Every year there's a miracle. And right now we're pre-Easter, you know, and in lots of philosophies, this is a time of Lent, you know, where we, you know, just re-examine, maybe do, you know, an assessment as what's working, what's not working, what are some things we want to leave behind before we, what seeds are we not willing to plant for the new crop of this year. You know, since some philosophies, the new year starts in spring, you know, some it starts in spring. So, you know, it's not a bad time to think about the newness of your life and what you're wanting to plant. Sorry, I don't follow directions. So today we're talking about accessing your limitless potential. And you know, I use the Affinity Sign for a sign and a symbol. You know, when we teach with signs and symbols and stories, it makes the bigger concepts a lot more accessible. And so when we use a symbol like the Infinity Sign, right within the sign, it shows us, then any good icon, any good logo tells us what it is. It tells us what it's speaking to. And in this sign, you begin to see fluidity. You know, there's a fluid nature to the infinite possibilities for yourself. You begin to see reciprocity, which is the ebb and the flow. So to be in the ebb and the flow is probably something that's going to help your potentiality. And then it also tells us about balance. I mean, look at the symbol. It's not bigger on one side than the other. There's a balance to it. So if we work with these three concepts in regards to our own infinite potentiality, it will give us some tools and ideas and inspirations that'll lead us into making this spring, you know, our best yet. So the first one is fluidity. And what I love about the idea of fluidity and us is that we're mostly water anyhow. And we're like 60% water as human beings, right? Now the interesting thing is the more mature we get, the less water we are. A baby starts out at 78% water. And you think about babies, they're like wiggly and jiggly and boo, and you know, and as we mature, but we get more, you know, stagnant. We get more rigid. We get less fluid as we get mature. So when Jesus says, be like little children, he's asking us to like get back to your fluid nature of not making things firm, of being a bit open-minded. So, I mean, isn't that interesting? When they say drink more water, it's because we're becoming less and less, you know, like water. And the idea of being like water is that what we talked about last week in regards to health. Water benefits everything. It blesses everything. So that's the idea of water, you know, to go with the flow. And there's another lesson that water gives us, which I think is really important. And it's the lesson of non-attachment. You know, water, when you see it rolling through a brook, it doesn't cling to the rocks. You know, it doesn't say, this is the only rock that's ever going to be. I love this rock. This is the most important rock. I have to hold on to this rock. You know, water knows there's way more where that came from. You know, and so it doesn't allow itself to get stuck or hung up or strung out. So when thinking about your own infinite potential, you might want to think about, where am I getting hung up and strung out? Where am I creating special altars? Because these are the blocks that are keeping me from my full-on potential. You know, where am I getting, thinking that this is as good as it gets? You know, it's never as good as it gets. And I have a story for you today to demonstrate that. Because you can't outgood God. So there are blocks. If there are blocks to your fluidity, you want to take a look at them. And one way for, you know, for when we get hung up or strung out, when we have an unforgiveness, there's a 3-step process that can move you out of and into greater fluidity. You know, there's a lot of processes. You know, Byron Katie has a great process, and her process is get a grievance, write it down, ask for questions, turn it around. It's a really powerful process if you want to use that. But another way, if you don't want to go download the whole thing and go through it, you can just use notice, question, shift. Notice, question, shift. So notice, first of all, I ask you the question, where am I hung up or strung out? Just notice that. Then question, where did this come from? Who authored this? This is not authored by my God. Where did I pick up this idea? Where did I begin to make this a true fact for me? So continue to question it until you get a holy answer, and then shift. And if you have to walk your way all the way around that situation until you get to a holy vision of it, that's an absolutely worthwhile use of your time. Because otherwise you're going to be carrying that block with you wherever you go. So 2 things will happen when you begin to notice, question, and shift. One is that you will walk your way around it and you will uproot that thing that you do not want to plant in your garden. Or the other thing is that you'll begin to walk around it in such a way that you'll gain so much compassion for the situation that you'll go, oh, now I can see that there, and it no longer has to mean anything to me. Like, I had a friend recently who is like kind of an eyesore in this community. He just likes to poke people in the eye, and everyone kind of goes, God, what about him? And we're like, yeah, we're supposed to be spiritual teachers and leaders, and we still like think like, does he have to come? And when I walked around it with him, I was like, you know what? Like, he's a really sad kid, you know? And if anyone needs love, it's him first, actually. It's him first. And the question, and I did a Byron Katie sheet on it, and it, you know, it says write down a grievance and get gritty with your grievance. And my grievance was he's an a-hole, and he's mean, and he's vicious. And then so it's like, turn it around. Where are you an a-hole? Where are you mean and vicious? And I'm like, I'm really not. And I felt clean about that. And then I was like, except for when it comes to him. Oh. And I was like, wow, he's the guy that's going to expand my consciousness. You know, he's the guy that's going to give me greater tolerance, because he's not going to be the only one lining up to poke me in the eye. You know, life sometimes pokes you in the eye. You know, what I say is you don't have to build a thicker skin, but build a lighter heart. You know, like, be able to navigate these things like water, pass by them merrily. Course of Miracles says, row, row, row the boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And it's a really nice thing to remember, you know, that all we have to do is do the next row in love to the best of our ability. So that's the idea of water. And the other two classrooms that this sign gives us is I should have numbered my pages, is reciprocity and balance. And reciprocity is giving and receiving. It's ebb and flow. And in A Course in Miracles, it says to give is to receive. You know, and that to know that I will be investing in the thing that I really care about. So every time you're giving, like, make sure you're giving in love to what you want to see grow. I know this sounds like a simple classroom, but when you really play it impeccably, you will be surprised at where you're called to give. So I had this one experience where I was at this conference, and I was asked to go uptown to this the celebration of life, and I had $2 in my pocket, and for some reason I was like, I'm going to give these $2 away to somebody on the street who needs them, but I'm not going to give them away in guilt. And the first person I came across was a mom who had cancer with a little kid, and she was like, I need money, and I was like, I feel so guilty because my mom died and I had all these hooks in it, and I was like, wow, this is exactly where I would normally give, and this is where I'm not to give today. I was just listening to the Holy Spirit and doing a scientific experiment. I went to the next person. This person was like falling apart. Every limb of their body and aspect of their being was just broken down. I was like, wow, I'm not supposed to give them these $2. Again, I was just doing a scientific experiment. The next opportunity were a bunch of street kids who were like, if you don't give us your money, we're going to take it anyhow. And they were doing these gymnastics, and I was standing there laughing hysterically. And I was like, oh, I want to see more of this. And that's where I gave my $2. But I gave them in a place that I wanted to invest in. It was a big classroom for me, and so I invite you to play around with that. You know, to not give out of guilt. That's not what you want to do. We've been groomed to give from guilt, and we continue to invest in situations that we don't want. And we also say to those places that we give. You don't have it, so I have to save you. We take on the hero role. If we want to get off the spectrum of villain, victim, hero, we have to start saying, you got this. You know, I know that you got this. And if you're able to give there without guilt, then that's your place to give. But don't think that you're God. Listen to God every single time. So that's reciprocity. Giving and receiving is one and the same. So where am I giving without conditions? Where do I give from overflow? And that means from joy. Like, where am I joyfully being fed and I want to extend there? Do I know that it's ultimately that investment is an investment with returns? Like, it is actually what I'm investing in. And then the other side of the spectrum is, where am I receiving? Some of us are better at giving, some of us are better at receiving. You might want to take a note to say, like, are you the person who somebody shows up with something, you're like, no, I got it. Like, a lot of us kind of do that. I do that sometimes. Like, I really want to control your giving. When I control your giving, I negate you from being a miracle worker. You know, so that's not helpful at all. So we get into the experience of open-hearted receiving. And ultimately, beyond the form of you and me, it's only you and God. It's only you and God. Every good concept, every good blessing that's ever come to you has come to you by right of your consciousness and your relationship with God. So you could say you're in the center of that idea of infinity. And your life is an outpicturing of how bold your infinite ideas are about God. And God will give you the concept, and it will come to you, and you'll say either yes or no to it. And think about the Blessed Mother when that concept came to her, and the angel was like, you're going to bring light into the world through the birth of this child who is impeccable. You know, it was like she could have said no, you know. But instead, she said, I don't know how to do that. And the angel said, we're going to take care of the details. The same exact scenario is true for you. When you're given a concept to bring your gifts out into the world, you might not know how to do it, but that's not a prerequisite to delivery. The only prerequisite is willingness. So the concept comes to you and you say, okay, you know, I know God's going to also handle the details to this concept. You just fill yourself up with grace and with faith, and then it becomes bigger than you, and it actually goes back to God. And then God receives it again and says, well done, my friend. And then God yes-ands you and returns it to you, and that's how this infinite thing continues to expand. But if the only one that's going to stop the process is you, not God. So we have to continue to build faith that we can do the things we're called to do, even if they're making us shake in our boots. And that means conversations, that means invitations, that means everything. And to specifically go where your boots are shaking a little bit, because that's where the growth is. Think about that little seed that we talked about. It doesn't rise gracefully. It shatters and shakes its way out of that shell. It becomes so uncomfortable that it busts and bursts out of itself. So don't think that your rise is supposed to be graceful. It's going to look awkward. You've never done it before. You know, just like here, this church, like, I've never created a spiritual community before. You know, so obviously, it's, as I prayed this morning, it's with the warts, the riddles, and the wonders that we move forward. And you know what? In my mind, I think that's beautiful. That's the only kind of church I'd want to go to anyhow. So why am I going to try and pretend to be something I'm not? So, glad I cleared that up. The other idea about giving and receiving is that in this optimal idea, there's no lone wolves. You know, a lot of us in this community have come here from a commitment to being a lone wolf. I'll do it my way. But always, you know, it doesn't get us that far. You know, it only gets us to a certain degree, and then we start to feel depleted. And so now is the time, and the new paradigm of where we're moving in is really to creating your tribe. And this could be just one of your tribes, but within this tribe, there's book clubs. Within this tribe, there's 12-step. Within this tribe, there's all these other circles. Because we want to invite you to go deeper than the Sunday morning conversation and engage in, you know, your expansion in all ways. And you might have your own idea of, oh, what do I, and it doesn't even have to be under the umbrella of Speakeasy. You know, Goddess gathered recently. Oh my gosh, they had a blast. I was so jealous of not being there. But, you know, but there are people there who had never been there before. There are gatherings and connections that are happening in this community that aren't under, you know, a group. They're just people getting together, and it's a really beautiful thing to witness. So that the only person that can do that for you is you. you're the one who's responsible for engaging, because otherwise it's stalking, and we don't want to stalk you. Although I'm not above it. No, I am. I'm past that, actually. I don't stalk anymore. So, I know. Say there is growth. So to access this deeper idea of your limitless potential, the ways to stay open are forgiveness, which we've talked about, open-mindedness, joyful anticipation. We are so on the wrong side of the seesaw sometimes when it comes to joyful anticipation. Instead, we say, this might happen next week, and this is what I'm afraid of. And we list out all the things we do not want to happen. I actually had a conversation with a woman on the phone the other day who's on our morning calls? Just raise your hand. Yeah, good stuff happens on the morning call, man. So she's on the morning call, and she says to me, this is a really weird thing to say on Sunday morning, but I'm just going to share it with you because I thought it was very interesting. She said, I'm really afraid of being raped, and so I'm going to buy a condom to carry in my bag in case that should happen, so I could talk the guy into putting it on so I don't get diseases. And I was like, whoa, like you really have created this scenario where that could more possibly happen for you. Like you have to be willing. And then I was able to tell her this. And of course, this isn't a story that I tell all the time either. I asked her, have you ever been raped? And then there was silence, and I thought, wow, that was a really rough question to ask in public. And but she said, no, I never have. And I said, well, I have, twice. And I don't carry a condom because those things did not define me and do not define me. Right? So these things that you fear, they're not going to kill you. They are not even going to be the most important thing about you. On the horizon in front of you, you might think they are, like, I will never live past this. But that's a fallacy. That's a heresy. You are so much more braver and bolder and brilliant than any of your fears could ever seek to define you. And so it really is time that we move into our joyful expectancy. Because what I said to her is, as long as you hold that idea in mind, you are condemning every man who comes under your nose. When in fact there are 1 billion men in the world who have never done such a thing, who are audacious and healed and holy and kind. And it's about time we start singing the good news and expecting men to rise to our optimal idea instead of condemning them to the worst case scenario. Can I get an amen? Right? But we're the ones to carry that story. So, went a little off topic. I wanted to tell you a different story. But you know what? You got to tell the stories that need to be told. So the joyful expectancy, the final thing to keep yourself open to infinite potential is questioning everything. Question everything. Question, 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 question. You know, when I contemplated infinite potential, you know, I'm a born questioner. And to a default, like people, I drive them crazy with my questions. And in the Catholic Church, I drove them crazy. And once I got into New Thought, I also drove them crazy because they told me this case, they were like, all things are possible. And I was like, all things? Like I could fly? And my minister was like, oh my God, like why is she asking this question? I'm like, no, really. I mean, does that mean that like if I thought about it, I could fly? Like I really wanted to know the answer to that question. And he was like, you know, Maureen, there's the thing called gravity. Like I can't, you know, I can't. And I was like, but what if you could get a magnet to go really high and you put on a magnetic suit and you could, and he was like, stop. Like there's more worthier things you could think about than how figure out how to fly. But what I would say is, no, there's not. No, there's not. These questions that you are entertaining, they're magnificent. And if the Wright brothers never thought about, could we fly, then we'd all be stuck in one place. The question is the catalyst to the invention. The question is the catalyst to the invention, and there's no stupid questions. So I had to learn that the hard way, to forgive myself for my, you know, unconditional questioning. And I invite you into unconditional questioning because that is where your potential lives, on the other side of those questions that you have not allowed yourself to ask. And if the Wright brothers didn't ask those questions, they were as insane then as me saying, can we fly? Is now. But look at the advances that we've made for the benefit of mankind. So question everything. Let yourself wonder. Let yourself meander. Let yourself move into the great mystery of God. And not just for your own good, but for the highest good of all. So this was actually the story that I wanted to just tell about scarcity. And when the opposite of infinite is scarcity, is this idea of scarcity, that we've been sold, and everything bad and broken comes from a belief in scarcity. The only thing we really have to annihilate is scarcity. There's more than enough food in the world. There's more than enough money in the world. There's more than enough talent in the world. The only thing that we have not enough of is the love to create places to have those resources move, because there's scarcity. And people have said, no, there's not enough. And I need to keep mine and hoard it. I have to can what I have, get what I can what I have, and poison the rest. So all of us have experienced this form of scarcity in one way or another. And for me, and it comes when you are most thin, when you are least spiritually fed, you will be susceptible to your own sickness of scarcity. So I had this experience happen when my mother-in-law passed away. And she had been my mother for 25 years, which is longer than my mother was my mother. And I had this wonderful relationship with her, and it came so fast, and I was not prepared for it, and I was so angry. And I got to her bedside, and I was there to watch her transition, but Will and I were looking for a house. We had to leave. And I finally came home to help with the preparations. My sisters had already been there. They did all of that pre-death stuff, which is a really great thing to participate in. And my father came to me and he said, the girls have distributed everything, but what did you want of hers? And I said, oh, I wanted that pearl bracelet that she had. It had a little rose clasp on it. My daughter's name was Rose. I thought I could give it to her, And my father said, I've already given that to her niece, Molly, who was her favorite. And I was like, fuck Molly. So welcome to church. Not my best moment. And my dad looked at me and he was like, not your best moment. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure about this. Fuck Molly. And so he conceded and he gave me the bracelet. And I went home to California with the bracelet. And I go off to church wearing the bracelet. I'm a good church lady, don't you know? So I go off to church wearing the bracelet. And at the same time, my husband and I were selling our house. And there was a showing in our house that day. And so I go to church, I come home, I go to put the bracelet away in the jewelry box, except the jewelry box is gone. Nothing. And I'm like, where's the jewelry? Where is it? My engagement ring, my grandmother's charm bracelet, my things that my sister brought, it's all gone. The box is gone. The whole thing's gone. I had it away in this little armoire. During the showing, somebody had come in and taken the whole box of jewelry. And I was devastated. So I went to the backyard. I was working as a spiritual practitioner at the time. I knew that I could heal myself with spiritual practices, so I went right to them. I sat in the backyard. I started meditating. I was like, Holy Spirit, everything's gone. I feel so violated. Everything's stolen. And the voice came to me and said, nothing's been stolen. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Everything's been stolen. Everything is gone. And he said, I feel so violated and angry. Like, help me get a reinterpretation on this. And the voice was, no, nothing's been stolen. And I was like, every time that idea came, I got more and more pissed. And I was like, what do you mean? Everything is gone. My engagement ring, my wedding ring, these things that I thought were so important. And it said, those things are only symbols. What's real is your husband's love for you. That's still real. What's real is your grandmother's love for travel. Her charm bracelet was just a symbol of that. Like, this is a symbol of infinity. What's real is your sister's love for you. Those earrings were just a trinket. And I was like, oh my God. That's so true. And when the truth hits you, there's no turning back. And my friends were like, are you going to fill out a, police report? And I was like, on what? Like, that wasn't real. Like, that's nothing to me now that I have the recognition of what is truly real. And I know that when we take our vows and when we give our gifts, I know that we know that the love is the real thing, but we get sometimes really forget that. And we think the things are the things. The things are the most important things. So a little bit after that, I didn't send out a police report, but I did tell my sisters all my jewelry was stolen. And in the mail, they began to send packages of jewelry to me, better than what I had. One of them was this encrusted diamond ring, and I wore it around town like I was like the cat's meow, as my mom would say. And I was like, look at this, ladies. My sister sent it to me in the mail. And they were all they'd all give me a funny look, and I like, maybe they're jealous, I went to get it fixed because it had a crack. The guy was like, it costs more to get it fixed than what it's worth. It was like a gumball machine ring. I had no idea. Like, I'm not smart enough to have good jewelry. So anyway, we give everything all the meaning it has for us, right? And then as I continue to move forward and remember that I don't want the things, I want the consciousness. I want you guys to have the consciousness. If you work on the consciousness, the forms will take the forms that are most optimal for you. If you haven't noticed, I got myself a 3 carat, but that came from my mother-in-law. But again, like, it cannot come in space of my peace of mind. Like, my peace of mind is the most important thing, and these things can come and go and come and go and will, because we live in the sands of time. If we let go of the things, we open up our pure potentiality to be so impactful for not just ourselves, but for everyone around us. And when you live in that state, it's so much better than the things. You know, it's so much more fulfilling than the stuff and the things. The stuff and the things will weigh us down, close it off, and choke it up. So we live in a society that has been, you know, bombarding us with the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the Joneses, keep up with them, blah, 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 blah. And here we get to really start to work from the true perspective, which is the inside out, our holy connection. And I promise you, if you do that, the things will take care of themselves. Go ahead, Holly.
Did you give Molly the bracelet?
I love that you answered that, you asked that question. Because I told this story for about 3 years. When I would sit in these groups like this and people would say, did you give Molly back the bracelet? I was like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. And then, like, finally, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and I was like, I got to mail that to Molly. And her and my, she had a connection with my stepmother on Christmas. It was their day. You know, as a kid who lost her mom, I just wanted a mom. I wanted to be the special one. We all feel that way, right? And so that's why I took the bracelet, because I wanted to be the special one. I didn't want it to be Molly. So when I got healed, I sent it to her on Christmas Day, and her sister gave it to her. And I didn't hear back from her about any of it, but today I can say, yeah, I got that right. You know, I corrected the shitstorm that I was creating. Thanks for asking, Holly. So this is a part from A Course in Miracles which I think is helpful. The Son of God is my true identity. The Son of God is my true identity. Like, am I going to stop at the definitions and the definers of society when the Son of God is my true identity? And it says, my holiness is beyond all the thoughts of holiness which I can now conceive. Beyond what I can now conceive are your holiness. That it shimmers in perfect purity, so far more brilliant than any light that I have ever looked on. This is you. You are that bright and that brilliant. Its love is limitless, and its intensity that holds all things within it in the calm quiet of certainty. Like, there's no rustle or worry or furry or scurry when you align with the truth of whose you are. Its strength comes from not from burning impulse, which moves worlds, but from the boundless love of God himself. How far beyond this world myself must be, and yet how near to God am I? So God knows our true identity. As we seek for this to be revealed to us, we'll be better equipped to move into alignment and acceptance of our true unlimited potential. And our acceptance of this unlimited potential will birth the forms and treasures and trinkets and relationships that are a reflection of your holy relationship with God. So why would you not go there first? You are worthy of this. You are worthy of this. Heidi on the call the other day was talking about when she came upon situations that ruffled her feathers and caused her to tighten up, that she began to use this word in regards to wonder, like just to stay in wonder. And when something ruffled your feathers, just to go, wow, wow. And one word I invited her to add to that was, wee. Because when we begin to see that it's, wow, we are creating this and I can help heal it and bring it to its highest potential, then we have every right to go through the world saying, wow, we. That's the inhale and the exhale of audaciousness. And it's time that we strap ourselves into that ride and allow ourselves to have a little fun with God. That's the word.